there, this is a Polish Up Your Pedagogy video on structuring and organising learning in a numeracy lesson. My name's Janie Henderson and I'm part of the pedagogy team. Before we get started, here's how the professional learning in this video links to the GTCS standards and East Lothian's pedagogy learning sale. Planning learning effectively links to standard 3.1 curriculum pedagogy and in particular 3.1.1. Planning effectively to meet learners' needs. In East Lothian, we have high expectations for teaching and learning, so the content of this video links to the expectation that learning experiences are structured appropriately to be challenging enough to stretch learners and ensure progress. The aim of today's session is to develop an understanding of various approaches for structuring and organising learning in a numeracy lesson. So when planning how to organise your learners for a numeracy lesson, there's a range of different successful approaches you can use. Each one lends itself to different types of learning and has a slightly different structure. The approach you choose to adopt when planning your lesson depends on what you're trying to teach, the needs of your learners, and whether you have any additional support staff or parent helpers during that lesson to scaffold and support your teaching. The three most common approaches that Robert Wright and his colleagues suggest are the collaborative learning model, the learning pairs and discussion model, and the rotational groups model. These are all outlined more fully in the purple book, Teaching Number in the Classroom, on pages 18 to 22. So the first approach is the collaborative learning model. This approach lends itself to whole class teaching and group activities. So in this first model, Model A, the practitioner would start with a 5-minute warm-up lesson, which is teacher-led. This would be quite fast-paced and would involve questions that consolidate previous knowledge. The learning intention and success criteria for the day's lesson can then be shared. This then leads to a 30-minute teacher-led section, where the teacher works on different numeracy questions, inviting answers from learners and encouraging learners to explain and share their thinking, in pairs and with the class. The third part of the lesson then involves the learners working individually on tasks linked to the whole class teaching input for about 20 minutes. These tasks are differentiated and the teacher can support learners appropriately. Finally, in the plenary, the teacher leads a whole class discussion, inviting learners to share their learning from the independent activities, explaining their ideas and consolidating the learning. And this should link back to the learning intention success criteria, which were shared at the start of a lesson. Model B offers a slightly different structure. The starter or warm-up part of the lesson, similar to Model A. The main part of the lesson involves learners working in groups to rotate through different stations. The teacher is available to scaffold and support individuals within this rotation. But before this, time needs to be taken for the teacher to explain these activities, outline any resources, and address any difficulties that might arise. Finally, the teacher leads a whole class discussion, focusing on the activities of each station, linking the learning back to the learning intention success criteria of the lesson. This model could work well if parent helpers or support staff are available to assist at some of the group rotation activities. The second approach is using the learning pairs and discussion model. It particularly suits inquiry-based learning, learning through problem solving. So in this model, the teacher starts with a 5-minute warm-up or starter, similar to those in the previous approach. This allows the teacher to consolidate prior learning on particular aspects of number knowledge or to develop learners' recall of number facts. The learning intention and success criteria for the main part of the lesson can then be shared. Before the teacher introduces the problems, probably no more than 4, the teacher and class can read them together and discuss how they may go about solving them. Then, the learners can work in small groups to try and solve the problems that have been discussed, with the teacher supporting groups or individuals. And finally, the plenary is again led by the teacher. The teacher would read each problem in turn and invite learners to draw or write and explain their solutions. The teacher can reinforce the different methods explained, highlighting those strategies that are particularly useful for more sophisticated thinking. The final approach, the rotational groups model, involves rotating ability groups around a carousel of activities. This may be a 3 or a 4 group carousel, depending on how many ability groups are in the class. These groups are flexible and will alter depending on the area of numeracy being taught. As with previous approaches, the lesson begins with a starter or warm-up. This is followed by a brief explanation of the activities the learners will engage with as they move around the different stations. Here is an example of a 4-group model. So you can see there are 4 ability groups: the rectangles, triangles, pentagons and circles. And here's the children who are in each group. Each group then moves around 4 stations in turn. At each station, there's a different activity. It may be an independent task, a partner game, an ICT task, as well as time with the teacher for direct teaching. The teacher can then tailor the content of each teaching session to the specific needs of that group. Each group could spend approximately 10 minutes at each station before moving on. This model could be adapted for 3 groups, with groups rotating around 3 stations. This visual could be shared and displayed on the interactive whiteboard or on the wall. Names and tasks can be displayed on flashcards, which can be moved as groups and activities alter each day. And finally, there's a teacher-led plenary. Learning can be linked back to the learning intention and success criteria, and the teacher can lead the discussion and invite learners to share their learning from the carousel tasks. So when you're planning a numeracy lesson and considering how you will organise the learning, you might want to consider this challenge question from Higgius 4. How well do we deploy a wide variety of teaching approaches when delivering teaching and learning? Thanks for listening.